welcome to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts with me, Steve Penny. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be talking to some great people. I hope you enjoy listening in. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm with Chris Wallace here from the Alternative Board, and we're going to have a conversation today about a few of his life journeys, where he thinks he's going, and we'll see where we get to as the conversation proceeds. So welcome, Chris. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks, Steve. Looking forward to it.
So I'd like to start off with a little bit of a sort of introduction of yourself, who you are, what you do, and any sort of key elements of your career that you want to talk about.
Sure. I'll try and keep it brief because sometimes it can be a journey. So currently, as you said, I own a business called the Alternative Board, which is business coaching and supporting business owners to improve their businesses and hopefully improve their lives. I also do some leadership training, leadership development training. I suppose it's been an interesting journey to get to that point. Originally trained as a PE teacher,
Okay.
And taught for a few years, but decided that teaching was not my passion. Much as I learned a whole lot of transferable skills, I didn't see that being as a teacher in front of classes. That led me into a role or several roles in local government around sports promotions and events marketing, running a large recreation and sports centre for a number of years, including over the earthquakes down here in Christchurch, some change management roles in the local government side of things, and then about 3 years of event management at a V-base, which is now Venues Otatahi, but the City Council's venue management arm running the Christchurch Town Hall and the stadium and the arena and things like that, and I was on very much the guest-facing side of the executive side of the team, event delivery, event planning, car parking, all of those things.
It seems like quite a varied career.
Yes and no. I joke that I had 20 years at council, but in about 5 different roles over the time. Yes, there's some variation, but there's also some common themes that I guess evolved over that time as I navigated those various changes and found my path and found what I felt was my sweet spot. And I think there was definitely a people relationship leadership component to most of those roles. That's the stuff I've really enjoyed out of what I've done over the last 20 number of years, 25 to 30 years.
It's all right.
Increasingly.
I'm in the 35 to 40 year bracket.
Yeah, they're just numbers, aren't they?
Just numbers.
No, but I think that it's been interesting, but there has, we'll probably talk about it, but there's been an element of serendipity and good timing in some of those changes, and also an element of opportunism, taking things as they come.
I think that's certainly something I would say in my own career, is that taking those opportunities is probably where I've learnt the most. That if I have any regrets, it's the opportunities I didn't take. But I certainly can go more into that as we go through the conversation.
Interesting is that's often the theory is we tend to regret the things we didn't do, not the things we did.
Yeah. I think even if it doesn't work out, you actually learn something about yourself in that situation anyway. So I think that there's always something to be gained from taking those chances in your professional career.
Absolutely, as long as you're open-minded and curious and open to opportunities, great things can happen. I think sometimes there's a risk when you narrow down your field of view or you close your mind to what the world can offer, then sometimes that's where opportunities get missed.
Yes, absolutely, yes. Just again, by way of an introduction, a little bit about your personal life. You're married, you have some children?
Yes, happily married to my lovely wife Cara. We just celebrated our 24th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yes, we've got the quarter century coming up, which we need to plan something for. Childhood sweethearts, met at intermediate school, got together in high school, and it's been going pretty well so far. Father of 2 boys, teenage boys, both at high school now, Max and Lockie, and they're sort of products of their parents in different ways, but keep us happy. And we, in the last couple of years, have adopted a retired greyhound called Sumo, who's also a bit of a nutbar.
Greyhounds not known for their calm demeanour.
No, well, they're not known for it, but they should be. They are the calmest, most easygoing dogs. Unless
they see a rabbit.
It's easy to see a rabbit or a shiny object, but even then, it's like it could be, depending on the day, it could be yeah, whatever, leave that, or let's go for it. But no, otherwise they sleep 18 hours a day and need about half an hour's exercise at most. So they're pretty good in terms of pets we've discovered.
Yeah. So how old's the dog?
He's just hit 4.
Right.
4, just over 4. Normally they retire at 4.
Yeah.
Or they get retired at 4. But he was not a particularly successful greyhound from the point of view that he's fast, but not as fast as some of the others.
Right.
Probably got a little bit distracted, and apparently on he only raced twice.
Okay.
And after the second one, that took them about 20 minutes to get for the stewards and the trainers to get him back into the trailer afterwards. And so
decided it was too.
They decided this is just too much effort. So let's just find I think he knew that his happy place was family pet, not racing dog. So, misnomer is that a lot of greyhounds have to be rescued, but there's increasingly there's a lot more that actually just retired. They get well looked after by their trainers, well trained and are looked after, and just they reach the end of their racing life and they make great pets. So there's a lot more of them on the streets, as you'll see around.
Just going back a little bit onto your professional career, so your transition from the events manager for VBase to the alternative board, what sort of brought that about?
Yes. Again, bit of serendipity there, and without going into too many details, VBase at the time was going through a bit of a reorganisation to create some efficiencies, as one does in council.
Also known as making people redundant.
Well, yeah, you could phrase it in such a way. And at the time, it was the conversations, and I was on the executive team, so part of this was around actually, people will be at the centre of this. But what I was saying was not necessarily consistent with some of that messaging, and I suppose as someone who prides himself on being quite people centred and leadership focused, there was a little bit of a disconnect between where I saw things were going and where I wanted to be. I got the sense that I would have been okay through that rec structure. There was opportunities for me, but I figured, right, that's 20 plus years in council. I think I'm big enough and ugly enough now to work out, to be confident in my skills and my experience that I'll work something out. It had been the last 18 months or so of that role had been sort of wearing 2 hats and quite significant roles. So combination of, I feel like I need a break, I feel like I want to do something else, and I need some time to work out what those things are. And to be fair, a bit of a safety net of having 20 years of council gives you an okay redundancy package. So a bit of a soft landing to make the call, and at the time it was a sort of a brave call, some called it, but also a selfish call to focus on myself and go, right, I think there's something more to give, and I need to take some time to work out what that is. Let's rip the band-aid off, withdraw from this process, and give myself some time to work it out. That was at the end of 2019. My family had planned a month in the States in January, so that was all prepaid. It was great, so it almost took the pressure off. I'll have the holiday, work out what I'm going to do next when I get back.
And then COVID.
And then, as we were coming back through Hawaii, there was some talk about a virus coming out of China. What's the problem? And I got back thinking, oh great, I'm going to be the early adopter, and I'm going to pivot and flex, and everyone else is pivoting as well. But in some ways that helped, because I'd keep my options open. Go, look, when I come back, I'll think about what I do. I might go find another job somewhere that I really enjoy. I might start a business. I might buy a food truck. I might consult. And I actually just didn't have a clear answer. I was open to all of those possibilities, and I said, right, I'll take some time to work it out. Mm-hmm. And of course everyone else was doing the same by that stage, so but in some ways that helped. It just took the pressure off having to go, right, I need something to pay the bills next week. And so it allowed me the time to do some good reflection, pause, all the cliches, reflect. Had some great conversations with some really trusted people that I have a lot of time for, who asked me some good questions and helped my thinking and as a sounding board, and sort of came up with a list of, right, the next thing has to have tick these boxes, not just what the job was, but what sort of how I wanted to spend my time. It had to involve people, I had to have a degree of flexibility and autonomy and things like that, and then that led to the things I'm doing now by having that clarity.
So, I mean, I wasn't really aware of the alternative board until I bumped into you, coincidentally,
over a cocktail or two.
Yes, at the Institute of Directors a couple of years ago. How did you become aware of that organisation?
I'd never heard of it either, and it'd be fair to say it's probably a better kept secret than it needs to be. But I actually saw it when they were advertising on Seek for new facilitators, new coaches, new business owners. They were just, right. And it so happened to be that the way the role or the opportunity was described in the ad, really nicely aligned with what was on my wish list of things, how I wanted to operate. So, again, I talked about serendipity earlier, that if I hadn't taken the time to come up with my wish list, I wouldn't have known to look for those things. And I think if you'd asked me 3 or 4 years ago, would I see myself being a business coach and leadership trainer today, I probably wouldn't have. But again, sometimes the paths aren't always revealed to you until you look back.
I think that's probably true of most people, is that your career path isn't something usually that's very clearly laid out in front of you. There are certain careers, I guess if you're in the military of some form, there's kind of a fairly definite way you're going to go. But I think outside of that, your career path can be quite convoluted.
Absolutely, more so now than ever. I think back in the day, I suppose you go to school, then you go to university in some cases, and you train up in a qualification and get a career, and you follow the career for 50 years, and then you die.
And you might end up staying with the same employer for that entire career.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think these days, with gig economies and side hustles and portfolio careers, there's a lot more opportunity to for that path to be more winding. And certainly as we move, I guess, from more a technical skill to a knowledge-based type economy or environment, those transferable skills and those softer skills, as some call them, become much more important. And those are much more transferable across a range of things.
I mean, I would say that whilst it's good to have a job for life with a particular employer, I think there's a lot more benefit to maybe staying in the same type of industry but experiencing it from different perspectives. Because I think that there's that diversity of thought is something that we always talk about. You don't get diversity of thought if you stay somewhere doing the thing the way they always do the thing. Whatever that thing may be. And I think the experience of working for other employers who are delivering a similar service in a different way actually broadens your own thinking and gives you a better grasp on the industry that you work in, I think.
Oh, absolutely. There's definitely a risk of groupthink. That we've always done it this way, and that sort of status quo bias is there. But equally, I mean, you say there's nothing wrong with staying with the one. There's some benefits to staying with the same employer for life. Absolutely. But I think it comes down to the individual. For some people who like that stability and like to become experts in their field, that's fantastic. That idea of having the same employer for life scares the bejesus out of me. And particularly now, having moved from employment into self-employment, it's amazing. But I think it's around about know thyself, and know what makes you tick, and not feel like you don't have choices. There's always options. There's always an ability to.
I think that's There's many times when you feel like you're being pushed into a certain decision, but the reality is usually there's always a choice. You don't have to make that particular decision. Allowing yourself the time, as you did, to focus on what it is you really want to do with your career is always a decision you can make.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's more economically challenging than others.
Yes, absolutely. There's always factors.
But taking that time, whether it's a week, a month, or 6 months, or a year, is actually probably more beneficial than the loss of earnings during that period of time.
Yeah, and it's probably even less about the time taken to do it, but just creating the space and consciously, stepping out of your day-to-day and thinking big picture. And if there's been one silver lining potentially of sort of pandemics and lockdowns, is I think a lot more people have had the chance to, because they can't be at work or they've had to, change their environment, have had an opportunity to think about, is this what I want to keep doing? Or actually, now that I think about it, I really haven't missed being at work. What is it about work that I haven't missed, and what have I missed, and then what does that mean for what I do next? And do I enjoy working at home with the kids? Do I enjoy? So I think that reflection time and that sort of self reflection and awareness is really key, and we don't do enough of it.
No, I think you're right there. I mean, from my point of view, I think the pandemic really focused my mind on the fact that I really want to make sure that I get to my ultimate goal, my retirement goal, and that whilst the business is important to me, it's not more important to me than that goal.
It's a means to an end.
It's a means to an end. It's a vehicle to get me to where I want to go, and that really helps me focus on what's important in my life. So I think that you're right. If you get that time and take it, then it can make a big difference to your outlook as much as anything else.
And you said, what's most important in my life? And if someone doesn't have an answer to that question, that's where they need to start. Because everything else wraps up around that, whether it's family, whether it's opportunities, whether it's what motivates you. But if you're not doing the thing that brings you joy or that makes you happy or that's really important to you, something needs to change. There's too
Well,
many
you'll
people.
find that you're unhappy in everything you do.
Yeah.
It affects every part of your life. If you're doing something that makes you unhappy, it's not just your job that's unhappy. It's your home life and everything else about you, unfortunately.
Exactly, and again, depending on your beliefs, this is not a dress rehearsal. You only get to do this particular life once.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my philosophy is, why not spend as much of that time doing the things that makes you happy, that plays to your strengths, that makes things better, for the people around you.
Yep.
If we were all in a position where we could do that, we'd probably be doing okay.
A lot less conflict in the world.
There probably would, and if there was conflict, we'd probably deal with it a lot more
differently,
productively than we sometimes do.
I guess one question I'd really probably want to focus a little bit on is, what would you say were the biggest challenges that you faced in your personal and or professional life up to now?
Yeah, it was a tricky one thinking about that. I consider myself reasonably lucky / blessed in the personal sense that I just, we all have ups and downs and challenges, but I feel like I've done okay. I haven't had any significant hurdles I've had to yet overcome. Certainly in personal life, aging parents and stuff like that. So things happen, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm reasonably grateful of for what I've got and what I've had and opportunities and privilege that comes with that. Professionally, there's been a couple of things in my life that have been not necessarily, they've been challenges, but also key milestones or key moments in my life. So I don't know if you want me to talk about those now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I used to be, and my wife would back me up on this, I used to be quite, probably the Scottish heritage in me, quite tight-fisted and always more focused on the future. Plan for their future, have the rainy day fund. This is all about how I want retirement to look when I'm, in 50 years from now. So I would penny pinch, or wouldn't go out for dinner or do things. And that was me, and that was fine at the time. And a couple of things have changed that perspective for me, and as well as probably getting older and more wiser and hopefully life experience and reality. But I suppose a couple. So one was obviously the earthquakes here in Christchurch. Mm-hmm. And at the time I was running Pioneer Recreation and Sports Centre as the ops leader there, and had a quite a large team to be responsible for and country clients. And I suppose not my job at the time, but just that realisation that whether it's walking in front of a bus or natural disaster or illness or something, we could all walk in front of a bus.
Yep.
And all very well, planning for 50 years from now, but don't forget to
live today.
All the stuff we talk about, all the mindfulness and being present and stuff. Yep. So that was, I suppose, a bit of a mind shift for me, going, okay, well, that, I could have been one of those trapped under a building or have a family member, and then life changes, and then your priorities suddenly get really real. So that was one thing. And then the other one, in the same role, I had a wonderful boss at the time. He's probably one of the best leaders I've worked with. Who I looked up to, had a similar leadership style to me. I wanted, it was almost that mentor that I looked up to. And Ian Whitehead was his name, and just a wonderful human being. Just a great person. I reported to him. He was my boss, and at one stage he was off on a trip with his partner to Turkey to hot air balloon and do a whole bunch of stuff. So, on his last day before his trip, shook his hand, said, right, I'll see you, have a great time, I'll see you when you get back, I'll look after the place while you're away. Never got to see him again. So he got diagnosed with cancer while he was overseas, hospitalised over there, flown back urgently to New Zealand and passed away in hospital within about 2 or 3 weeks of me shaking his hand saying, see you later. So he'd been unwell for a long time but didn't know. So it was all that, So I suppose for me that is another wake-up call going, crikey, that could happen to any of us.
Yep.
So between those two things, earthquakes and Ian's losing Ian, I think that switched me from being the plan for the rainy day, think for the future. Probably the pendulum swung too far the other way for a while, where I was like, just live in the moment, don't worry about the future. And I think probably feel like I've got the balance reasonably well now, that I really am motivated by enjoying life and not sweating the small stuff as much as possible, and making the most of the moments and enjoying experiences and gathering those, while still going, okay, but I want to make sure the family's set up. I want to make sure that we have comfortable next 20, 30, 40 years, and that we've got choices to do stuff, because I really appreciate freedom and flexibility.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really motivating me in that same way is that my parents unfortunately have no pension fund at all. They're reliant totally on the state pension in the UK, which is less than worthless,
Yes.
really.
Yeah.
And they're really struggling. You know, they're making choices about whether they eat or heat the house and
Yeah.
that kind of thing on a regular basis,
Yeah.
which, you know, it's a terrible way to be, because my dad's started work when he was 16, worked all the way through his life till he was 65.
Yeah.
My mum was a stay-at-home mum for most of her life, but again, she was contributing because she was looking after the house and looking after the kids, and she got no pension at all, and he's got a minimal pension. And, you know, for all of that hard work that he's put in throughout his life, there's no recognition at all, really.
No.
And, you know, it doesn't feel right that we can do that to people that have supported us for our entire lives.
Yeah.
And it just upsets me, really, to think that, you know, that there's that possibility still exists in the society. We're supposed to be a relatively rich society,
Yes.
but we can't provide for those who need it.
No, and the inequity we see.
The inequity is enormous. I mean, it's worse in other parts of the world than it is in New Zealand and in the UK, but I still think that there's a lot more that we could do, and a lot better that we could do by those around us that need our help.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know,
and I went to a lecture once from Nigel Latter, the psychologist, who one of his sort of takeaways was, you know, he just tries to live a life that when he goes to bed at night, that he's done something that makes the world a slightly better place each day.
Yep.
And again, that whole small changes, you know, think globally, act locally, because we can't do everything, and we can't change everything, but we can control how we react to others, you know, the choices we make, and trying to be that better human.
It's too easy. I think it's too easy in the current society to say that what we do doesn't really have an impact, so therefore it doesn't matter what we do. And I think if everybody thinks like that, then nothing changes and the world suffers. I think if you do make a decision to do something that may be a little bit uncomfortable for you, but means that something is better for somebody else, then that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's too easy to hide behind the mass of people that aren't doing anything.
Yeah.
And, you know, the more people that actually step up and do something, the better the world will be.
Yeah.
And I think we just have to try and, as you say, think globally but act locally is a really good way of putting it.
Absolutely. And even if that's just down to the checkout operator in the supermarket who, you know, just showing some humanity and engaging them, saying thank you and smiling, or the person who makes you coffee is, you know, it doesn't take huge gestures, but it's small things. You know, they're human. They're having all sorts of issues.
Certainly people in the hospital industry at the moment, after the 3 years that we've had with the disruptions through COVID, I mean, they're all struggling, and it's easy to forget that. Because if you're lucky, like I've been, really, that COVID hasn't really impacted on my work significantly. There's been a few challenges, but not to the point where I've got nothing to do, and you know, there's been struggles, but that's, you know, nowhere near as much as there has been in the hospitality industry. And I think it's easy to forget that.
Yes.
And it's easy to forget that the people in the healthcare industry have been under an enormous amount of stress and strain because you're not living that stress and strain. Absolutely. You don't notice it, and then you wonder why they're a bit grumpy when you go into the A&E, or, you know, and, you know, there's that. I think somebody's said many people have different people have said this, is it's best to think about the way you react to other people's interactions with you, because you don't know what their life is like. And there could be something horrible happening to them that is impacting on the way they react to you, and just take that principle in the conversation and make sure you don't overreact to a situation without fully understanding.
Empathy for our fellow human being is, and, you know, walk a mile or get inside someone's head and understand what's going on for them, or at least understand that you don't know what's going on. So you know, a little bit of empathy and goes a long way.
Absolutely. I guess one other thing I don't think we've touched on it really is there a particular event or thing that you've done in your personal professional life that is probably your proudest moment? Well,
I suppose the obvious things around having a hopefully so far a successful relationship and raising some two pretty good humans to date is noteworthy. Professionally, I really love galvanising or team achievements, and the one that sort of stands out, maybe not the top of the list, but certainly one that stands out is post the mosque shootings here in Christchurch. I was at V-Base at the time. You know, it was a tragic event, but man, in terms of galvanising a team to action, our team at V-Base was amazing to throw together. You know, if you remember the public prayer service in Hagley Park for 25,000 people within a space of a week, and all the moving parts that went on behind the scenes to put together an event of that size in that time. Yeah, that was just everyone doing what needed to be done regardless, because it was for the greater good. And there's been a couple of occasions when you know, whether it's for something like that or even just a concert or a large event, where everyone's pulling their weight, everyone's aligned and towards a common goal.
Yep.
And, you know, playing to their strengths, but, you know, it's not about personal interest, it's about the greater good.
I think that a lot of the time that only happens if there's a high level of trust as well. That everyone trusts that everybody else is going to do their job.
Yeah, and then sometimes that doesn't always plan out. I mean, again, earthquake, you know, the response post-earthquake would be another example. You know, it's funny to say, but I've sometimes described that as one of the best team-building exercises I've ever been involved in, is post-quake response, where we had some team members in the facility who were in leadership roles that you would assume would step up and you know, front up, that didn't.
Yep.
Sometimes they had good reasons for that. Sometimes they were just absent.
Yep.
And then you had others who had, you know, house issues and you know, loss in their own life, who were there every day fronting up, doing things for everybody else.
Yep.
And I think it highlighted, you know, when the shit hits the fan, you know, who steps up.
I think that sort of challenging situation, you never really know who's going to step up in those circumstances, and it does come down a lot of the time to the personality of the people involved. But one of the things that's sort of similar, on a similar line, I worked a lot in the health sector when I first came over to New Zealand, and immediately post those quakes, there's quite a few conversations with the DHBs around the country about how they were supporting CDHB because of what was going on down here. But what came out of it was I think people were quite surprised by, is that they hadn't really thought about the impact of an event like that on the first responders.
Yes.
And how you couldn't have the first responders being the ones that everybody else relied on, because they also had families, they also had houses, and they also had these issues that everybody else was experiencing at the same time. And actually the support that was needed from the rest of the country was focused on those first responders initially, because they were unable to concentrate on their job because they didn't know what their house was, immediately post-quake, didn't know whether their family was okay, didn't know what was happening with their house, didn't know any of the stuff that you need to know to, that stuff impacts on how you are at work.
Yeah.
And if you don't know anything about what's going on with your family or with what's going on with your husband, your kids, whatever it may be, it makes it really difficult for you to focus on your job.
Absolutely.
So that again, that's the empathy thing, recognising that everyone is going through the same situation and you've all got to help one another, was something that I think that really brought the community of Christchurch together immediately post the quakes.
And also, even not in times of crisis or disaster, the whole idea of that you can't fill someone else's cup from an empty vessel when you put, now that doesn't mean just be selfish and look after yourself, but recognising that with the business owners I work with and other leaders that I'm training, that it starts with you. It's all about you, but it starts with you and around having clarity over why you do what you do, what's important. So you can be whatever the best version of yourself is for the people that you influence. Whether it's as a boss, as a partner, as someone you see across the counter. It's it starts there. And I see a lot of business owners who have forgotten or don't feel like they can put themselves first, and they're sacrificing a whole lot of things for the people they're responsible for, but doing themselves some damage at the same time.
Yeah. Case in point.
Not mentioning any names. It's very common.
It is very common. I mean, I've certainly seen that from my interactions with you and the alternative board group that we're with. That I think a lot of us are very guilty of exactly that. That we put the business and the staff way ahead of ourselves, and it's to the detriment of the business to do that a lot of the time. Yeah,
and we have to think we're indispensable. Like, if I'm not here, everything's going to fall apart. And sometimes that's the case. But then the challenge is, well, at some point, one way or another, you're not going to be here, whether it's by choice or otherwise. Yeah. If you want to build a resilient business that's sustainable and enduring. How do you do that at the same time as extracting yourself from it at the right time and the right way?
It is a challenge for sure. It is a challenge for sure. One that I'm trying to face.
It's a work in progress.
Absolutely, a work in progress. Yeah. Something else I was going to ask is there a point in time where you've heard or learnt something that's fundamentally changed your view?
Fundamentally, other than those two examples about changing my mindset on terms of future focus versus now focus and that balance, I suppose I would be one of those people that calls himself a lifelong learner, aka curious and nosy. So I love gathering information. I think knowledge is something that's one of my sort of values, is not actually being an expert in stuff, but just finding out stuff and learning stuff. So rather than, I don't think there's been sort of like a singular moment going, oh, now it all makes perfect sense to me. But I think it's much more evolutionary for me. As I love, I love to read and I love to listen to audiobooks and podcasts and talk to interesting people. And I think every one of those is an opportunity to just evolve my own thinking, my own knowledge in some way or another. And I had a great coach a few years ago, in the leadership space, who, I don't know if it was his idea or where the original idea came from. He talked about, you can either have weak ideas held strongly or strong ideas held weakly. And I think I fall into that latter category, whereas I believe stuff, but I'm not going to hold an idea so tightly that I refuse to change my mind. So if I'm presented with more information or a different way of seeing things, I'm willing to change that. And I think that curiosity or that sort of open-mindedness has stood me in good stead in my journey so far.
It's a fundamental skill, really, being open-minded. If you're not open-minded, you miss a lot of opportunities, and you potentially will pigeonhole yourself in a way that limits your career options, limits your life options that would otherwise be a lot more open. And I think that's something that I've certainly learned, that there's nearly 40 years working in the industry that I'm in. I am far from an expert.
Absolutely.
And there's plenty of people out there that are way smarter than I am at what I do.
Yes.
But recognising that and using my other skills, my soft skills and my ability to manage people to get the best out of them is probably where I see my biggest strength. And that sort of ability to recognise that I know I'm not going to be the smartest, but I know people who are the smartest appear to be, and can help them on their journey, and they can help me on mine. And I think that's certainly a good way to look at things.
Exactly. Well, they say good leaders surround themselves with people smarter than them.
I'd rather be the dumbest person in the room, I think, most of the time.
But that comes with an element of vulnerability to be willing to go, to be that and go, actually, look, I don't have to be the expert, or I don't have to be the smartest, I don't have to be the most powerful. It's okay to surround myself with, my job as a leader, and whether it's a business owner or otherwise, is to make the people around me better, and allow them to shine. If they do well, I do well, and that's that's a learning journey for a lot of us as well.
What I've noticed, certainly in my interactions with some business owners, is there's a lot of ego involved sometimes, and that can get in the way of good business and good relationships, because it becomes all about you and all about your voice and all about your opinions, and I think that's detrimental in a lot of ways to the way that we interact with one another.
Not just business owners, though.
Not just business owners.
One thing I'm constantly reminded of in all I do is that humans are fascinating, which means my work is never boring, because you just never know where a conversation is going to lead, or where someone springs a surprise on what they do in their spare time, or whatever it might be. So people are fascinating, but also that our brains are very powerful tools that can work for and against us. And so ego, we're human, so we have fears and we have hang-ups and we have biases and things like that. And I really love helping people unpick and understand that and question themselves and be curious about that. Because I think that it starts with self-awareness.
Absolutely.
If you know yourself really well, then you know what your strengths are. You know why you're afraid of certain stuff, and you can do things about it, but not try and hide it or not try and pretend that you're perfect, because none of us are. We're just imperfect in different ways. And recognising that we have weaknesses is probably one of the hardest things for us to do. And I think in particular, for men. I think men suffer from a stereotype where they have to be the strongest and the quickest and the best. And certainly of our generation, I'd say that's true. I don't think it's necessarily true of more recent generations, but I do think that we as a generation of men have got a lot to learn from those coming after us. I would say, because there's a lot more openness now about our weaknesses than there was when I was growing up. Yes.
And even the terminology you use when you're talking about somebody, if you're saying you're acting like a girl when I was a kid, that was a weakness, and that was a wrong thing to do.
Or the harden up, or
all of those attitudes.
Act like a man. I mean, it's killing us.
It is,
unfortunately, and not to say that the younger generation coming through have it all swimming. It's a pretty complex world to be growing up in. I mean, something I'm aware of with my boys as teenagers. It's schooling's different, society's quite different to when I was a teenager, and that's
I think
daunting.
the biggest change for me, for the kids that are our kids and their kids, is the level of interaction with things like social media.
Yep.
In that when I was a kid, didn't have a computer, for example.
let
alone social media.
Yeah.
I think I was 15 or 16 before I saw a computer.
Yeah.
And that was one of those Spectrum things which had a memory of about 5 gig.
Oh, honestly, I was a Commodore 64 guy.
A Commodore 64, which is 64 bits.
Yeah, and you put the cassette in, and then to load a game, and then you wait 20 minutes while it loads, and then you flip it over to do the other side. Not this instant gratification. What do you mean I have to wait 3 seconds to buffer that video? It's like,
yes, and that wonderful noise you used to get from the modem.
Yeah, which I will not recreate for you right now. I'm not
Thank
sure
you
if
for that.
Do
but
justice.
I thought that does lead me on to something, that you look at the way things have changed in our lifetimes. I mean, there have been fundamental changes in the way that humans interact with one another, the way that we do our jobs, the way that we travel, the way we experience things have all changed enormously in just our lifetimes. And one of the things that I'm very aware of is that change hasn't actually slowed down.
No.
It's actually, if anything, accelerated.
Oh, it definitely has. Yes.
And the biggest challenge I think we all face is how we deal with that change. And how we make it part of our day-to-day life, and what impact it's going to have on our ability to do other things.
Yes.
One of the things that I certainly have found is that things like Googling the answer to questions is ruining the art of conversation. Now, there's gone are the days when you sit in a pub debating about who was in what film and when, because now you just go onto Google and the argument's over.
Oh, I'm probably the wrong person to ask about that, because I again, my thirst for knowledge, if I'm watching a movie, I go, what was that person in again? And I've got to jump on IMDb and work it out, because I just need to know the answer. But I agree. I think
there was always the debate that you could have a debate about a subject and you could learn stuff from other people because of that debate. Now you don't have that debate.
So we always need to create the forum to still have those debates, even if it's not around specific answers. It's around some
around
of those
a conversation,
skills.
Generating a conversation about a movie and what that movie meant to you, is rather than who was in it, when did it come out, that kind of thing.
So it's high level.
I think it concerns me that the current generation is so reliant on artificial intelligence to some extent that they're going to lose that art of conversation. And certainly when you look at the way that they interact now, there's a lot of acronyms that are used in conversations. We don't use the whole word anymore, and I think that's a negative thing.
Although I had 20 years at local government, so if you want a 3-letter acronym, I'm your guy.
There's a difference between using it in a professional situation where it actually has it's an easier, quicker way of using terminology. But when your entire conversation is a series of acronyms, it takes something away from the art of conversation, I think.
Yeah. Well, conversation is scary, and I think that or can be seen as scary. And I know there's some of the youth growing up today, why things like Snapchat and TikTok and stuff have become so popular, partly, apart from dopamine hits and things like that, is partly around the ability to control the dialogue to a degree, where you can record your response to someone's question, make sure you've got the words right before you press send. And so rather than the live conversation like we're having now, where what happens if I say the wrong thing? Or what happens if I'm asked a question I don't know the answer to, and that's scary, there's an element of control. So then the challenge becomes, how do we create those environments where everyone can, I guess, practice the art and the science of having a conversation, where it's safe, where you don't feel like you're going to be thrown under the bus if you say the wrong thing, or you're going to be judged by it. And again, that comes back to that empathy thing, that how do we give kids, if we think about that audience, how do we give kids opportunities and tools to confidently have conversations?
I think that starts at the home, doesn't it? That if it's a case of you sitting down and having conversations with your kids and not relying on the technology to do so. Yeah. That's, I think, it's too easy to fall into that habit.
Yeah.
And I know I'm very guilty of it. I mean, it's easy to say what you should do. It's much harder to do what you should do. But, you know, I'm certainly, myself and my wife will sit at home in the evening and we'll be looking at our phones or watching the TV and barely talking to one another. And that's
sending each other memes from 2 metres away. Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
I mean, and that's something that we're all guilty of doing.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be very deliberate about having a conversation with somebody and sitting down with them and actually talking to them about a subject, whatever that subject is something you have to plan to do.
Yeah.
And you have to make the effort to do
time
it.
and space.
And make the time and the space. As
Much
you say.
like we said earlier on, you know, it's important to make time and space to work out what you want to do and what's most important for you in your career or whatever. Equally, it's about, you know, the whole cliche about putting your big rocks in first is working out what are the most important things. And if a relationship's really important to you, you've got to work at it.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, you don't stay married for 25 years without putting some effort in.
Yeah, and without making a whole bunch of mistakes, and without being vulnerable, and without getting some constructive feedback, and compromising, and all those things. I mean, it's not that different. So,
no, it isn't.
But it takes effort. Like anything that's important usually takes a bit of effort.
Yes.
You just have to decide if the effort's worth it, and for these things, it usually is.
It is. I mean, I think that the connection with your children is probably one of the most important things in your life. If you don't have that connection, you're losing out on an enormous amount of opportunity to see them grow and see them become adults.
Yeah.
And you know, that's one thing that I'm really very conscious of is I want to keep that connection. I want to be able to have conversations with my kids, with their kids, with whoever else it may be in their lives. Because if you don't do that, then you're missing out on so much. You know, and they've got a better handle on TikTok and Snapchat and everything else that's going on in the world than I ever going to have. So,
absolutely,
you know, it's great to keep those connections going.
Well, it starts with communications, isn't it? Whatever form it is.
Absolutely.
You know, as humans, we are wired to communicate and to connect with each other. Yes, how we do that has evolved and will continue to. You know, we talk about the pace of change. Who knows what in 5 years from now is going to be the modus operandi for how we communicate? But
well, it's going to be chat CBT, isn't it?
Oh well, yeah. So we could be doing this. I just press a button and saying, you know, what answers does Steve want? And it'd replicate my voice, and I could be sitting, you know, on a beach drinking a pina colada.
Well, I mean, that, you know, just expanding on that subject, I've just shown you, Chris, the list of questions that we're going through.
What do you mean we prepared this? This is all off the cuff, Steve.
It's all off the cuff, yes. No, and the list of questions that I've got there, I actually got out of ChatGPT.
Wow.
So but if I've read those questions and I've changed some of the wording slightly, but none of those questions. If I was reading that, I wouldn't know that had come out of
No, you have to chuck it through that other app to see if it identifies it as AI generated or not.
I mean, and that for me, you know, I did that as a bit of an experiment to see what it had come up with, because I hadn't used the interface before, and I was actually very surprised and a little shocked at how good it was.
Absolutely.
And I've actually used it on another thing as well. The job description that I've got up on LinkedIn at the moment, all through ChatGPT.
Wow.
So I put in what I wanted it to be, and it was 2 sentences, and it gave me a 2,000-word job description.
Wow.
And I've read it through, and
you couldn't argue with it.
You couldn't argue with it. So,
and that highlights the fact, doesn't it? You know, there's a school of thought, like robots are going to take over the world and AI is going to be the ruin of us, and we need to resist it. It's like, well, I think this point where we could resist it is long gone. You know, the technology has always made our lives different, and it's always been opportunities and forks in the road with pathway with technology. Okay, do we use this, you know, for good or for evil? Or do we use it to enrich us and make us better as individuals, or worse? You know, 20 years ago, you know, emails, smartphones, you know, none of that stuff happened, or you know, pick any technology that increasingly speeds up.
My perspective on it has been probably honed over the last 20 years, in that when I first started in the career that I was doing, all of the calculations I had to do were done manually, because there wasn't software to do them. Well, no, a scientific calculator, not very much. But you know, it wasn't a case of you put some numbers into a piece of computer software and the answer comes out. It was actually, you had to work through it manually and do the calculations yourself. And one of the concerns that I have is that if we are too reliant on the technology, we forget how to do things ourselves. Then we don't know whether the answers we're getting out of the system are in the right range. And that's something that in my industry in particular, if you get the wrong number, then you base your design on the wrong number. Everything you've done after that point is wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So there is a
Buildings
really
fall
important
down the
services don't work, whatever it may be. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is a need for us to recognise and respect that there are limits to what the computers can do, and that there needs to be human input, and there needs to be a level of control over the output. Because if you just let it go and do what it does without control, you're going to get the wrong answer.
Yeah.
Whatever that system may be.
Some way of maintaining oversight, or be able to check in, or apply a human factor to it.
Well, that adage, shit in, shit out. If you put the wrong stuff in, you're going to get the wrong stuff out.
Yeah.
And if you don't know that, if you don't actually know to question the answers you're getting, then you'll just accept that it's because it's come out of a computer, it must be right.
But whether it's ChatGPT or your Excel spreadsheet, it's the same thing, isn't it?
It's the same thing, exactly.
Or the piece of paper. Yeah. So I think, I remember hearing some data recently that as humans we have we're so busy, but life's so complex. We've got as much, if not more, leisure time now than we did before all this stuff came along. It's just how we're choosing to use it. Whether it's doom scrolling through Instagram or trolling someone on Facebook or whatever. It's how we choose to spend the time. How do we use technology to automate and enhance our lives, automate the stuff that we don't need to apply a human brain to.
Yep.
So we can apply that wonderful tool much more effectively in the right direction, not on probably mindless tasks. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm quite comfortable using that AI chat GPT because I know what I want to get out of it, and I know that if I get something out of it that isn't right, I'll recognise that.
You're not blindly pressing send and sending out to the universe.
I'm not just using it to do something that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's a skill that needs to be learnt by everybody that's using that interface. Is that it's very easy to say, okay, well, it must be right because it's come out of the computer, and it must be right because it makes sense when I read it. But if you don't know whether it's right or wrong in some fundamental way, then you're going to be missing out on an experience in some fashion. You're going to deliver something that doesn't meet expectations. And that is something we all need to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me, I suppose, who loves learning and knowledge. It's an exciting and interesting time and daunting. And I read a book recently called "The Future is Faster Than You Think." It's all around the convergence of technologies. Whether it's robotics or AI or computing power or nanobots, and how all of those things are basically every one of those is accelerating exponentially. And so what happened in 10 years is now going to happen in 5 years, is going to happen in 2 years. Okay, so that's amazing to think what potential that could create, but also how our abilities as humans to evolve at that same pace and adjust to those.
That's the issue, isn't it? That we aren't able to evolve at that pace. That the changes in our physiology, the changes in our physicality, take multiple generations.
Yeah.
The stuff that's happening is happening in the space of a few years.
Yeah.
We're way behind in terms of our own evolution in order to keep up with the pace of change in the technology we're using.
And the risk becomes, what decisions do we make now? What do we implement now that we don't have the foresight to understand the implications of?
I don't know who it was, but there was somebody that was quoted as saying that the social media interaction that our children are currently having is the largest ever social experiment, and we won't know the outcome for about 2 generations.
Yep.
And I think that is true of a lot of the technology, that it looks good, but we really don't know what it's going to do. And we don't know how it's going to impact on our kids and their kids and their kids' kids.
Yeah.
And until we have that data, and it's all about the data, until we have that data, we really don't know whether it's good or bad.
But in 20 years' time, there'll be a whole bunch of other stuff, Absolutely. And the reality is, what's the alternative? We just pause and say, let's just wait 20 years and see what happens.
You can't do that, can you? But I think it's
being
aware that there might be an issue and making some kind of contingency plan to deal with that issue should it arise.
And having some really clear principles and values that we all agree on. These fundamental truths are important around how we want to operate as an individual, as a society, as a tribe, as a human race, whatever.
Yeah. But then, I mean, that opens up a whole other discussion topic when you see the way that the internet influenced government policy on the pandemic, the way that social media was used as a blunt instrument to batter people into doing the wrong thing. And there's a lot of evidence of it doing bad things. It's about how we control those bad things and show the good side of it as well, giving people access to information should be a good thing.
Absolutely.
But it can be abused, and I guess that's something we all need to be aware of, isn't it?
I think let's just sum that up and say it's a complex world, and
It's a complex world. And it's getting more complex.
And it's going to get more, and that's scary, but it's also reality. And go, okay, well, how do which right back to that, what can we control? There's a lot of stuff we can't control. We can control how we present ourselves. We can control how we interact with our fellow human beings that we see on a daily basis. We can control what we prioritise, where we spend our time, as much as possible.
Yeah.
Or as I read recently, you can either choose how you spend your time, or someone else will choose it for you.
Yeah.
And I think that whether you're a business owner or a mum or whatever, what are the most important things? Keeps coming back to some version of that question.
It really does. Yeah, I think you're right. Sort of going on that same vein, I guess, is there a piece of advice that you've got, something now that you would love to give to your 20-year-old self?
Well, other than the obvious, invest in Apple and all those sorts of things.
Buy Bitcoin.
Yes. Really
said it before 20.
Yeah, exactly. Really good question, and I've probably got lots of answers because unfortunately there's always lots of ideas bouncing around the head. But probably the one that immediately comes to mind is make sure that you. So I'm talking to my 20-year-old self. That have a clear picture of what your version of success is. Mm-hmm. I think I spent, much like most of us, spent a lot of my career and profession chasing someone else's definition of that. It's the fancier title, the bigger salary, the nice office, how many people report to me, look at how many awards, the car, all those measures of success that are often other people's measures or externally focused. And I think one thing that I've definitely reflected on and learnt in my last 2 or 3 years where I've sort of changed my path is what I thought was my version of success then is quite different now. So for me, being comfortable going, look, I've got a day where I actually don't have any coaching sessions, I've got no meetings, I might just walk the dog and read a book on the deck. Mm-hmm. And not having any guilt attached to that because I've consciously chosen that's how my journey, my path is. And my version of success is I'm able to do that.
Yeah.
And that other people may not value that. They may not think that's important, but they don't need to. It's about me. So I think my advice to the 20-year-old self would be some version of half the stuff you think matters probably doesn't. Yeah. Just take some time to work out what does. And make decisions based on that.
Again, it's coming back to that. What's important to you, and it's. I think you're right. When you're early in your career, you're focused on what other people think of you, and it's really important to you that other people think that you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that actually doesn't matter as much as whether or not you enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because doing a good job at something you hate doing is no life.
No.
And I think
it's a horrible life.
It's a horrible life. Yeah, it is. If you get up every morning dreading going into work, then the reality is you're probably not doing a good job because you don't want to be there.
No, and you're probably influencing people around you in a negative way. But often people find themselves in that and they feel like they've got no option. Yeah. The whole lack of that learned helplessness of I can't do anything about this. To me, if you're in a job or running a business that you don't, that's not making you happy, then you can suck it up. You can speak up and try and change that world, or you can leave it. And there's always other options, even if you have to flip burgers for a while.
Well, there's been a couple of times in my career where I've made decisions to move jobs only because the new job paid me more money, and pretty much almost exclusively it's been a bad move.
Yeah.
Because chasing the dollars or chasing the pounds as it was then actually isn't the right reason for making a decision.
Yeah.
I moved to a business that was really totally against my own values in the way it operated, and it made me very ill. I ended up in hospital.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it's
your body tells you.
Body told me what was going on. I mean, it was all stress related, and it was actually I know where I was on 9/11. I was in hospital.
Wow.
And I was in hospital because I'd been working all weekend trying to get this job done, and I was totally stressed out, and it made me really ill.
Yeah.
And that was a decision. Immediately after that, I just thought, I'd actually gone to see a couple of different people. I went to see a counsellor, and the counsellor said to me something that I reflected on later as realising how right he was. He said, that job's no good for you and you've got to change it. And my response to him was, but I really need the money.
Yeah.
And
At what
6
cost?
months later, I was sitting there thinking he was right. I should have just He should have changed it.
Yeah.
And it's something that I reflect on quite regularly. Is if I hadn't done that, where would I be now? What difference would it have made to my life not doing that job? I don't really regret it because I did learn from it.
Absolutely.
It's something I've applied subsequently where things have not gone the way I wanted, and I've made a change. So, but I think that it's really important that you do reflect on that. Regularly, am I doing what makes me happy?
Yeah.
Because if you're happy, you're doing a good job. Your family's a lot happier.
Absolutely.
Everything around you is a lot happier.
Yeah, and we spend a lot of time at work in some capacity, so all those cliches those are key questions to ask yourself.
Yeah.
And yes, it's not the same. Money's not important, but I think I've certainly learned.
It's only one factor.
And for me, it's almost what does money allow? As long as I'm paid enough so that I can, take the kids to the movies or go on an occasional trip or go out for dinner for anniversary. Those are the things that matter.
Yep.
It's the money. Money enables that, but more money doesn't mean more of that necessarily. Certainly if the trade-off is, I'll get paid twice as much, but I have to work twice as hard. I think that's sometimes where people fall over. It's that
I think you're right.
You make $1 squillion, but you've got no time to enjoy it.
So going on from that conversation, what is it that you do to recharge your batteries? How do you get out of work? And what's your if you were your escape from the day to day?
Yes. Sort of one thing I'd say is with what I've consciously done, consciously or unconsciously, or where I've landed, the last year or two. One, the starting point is I don't feel like I very often run down my batteries too much. So I'm not, lazy is not the right word I should be using, but I don't work any harder than I want to or need to, and so there are times, I'm not. Churning at the treadmill for 50 hours a week and then having to find something to recharge too much. Right. I have busy days and I have busy weeks and things like that, and sometimes there's a lot on, but I certainly have plenty of pause within that to, as I say, walk the dog or
take a breath.
Yep. I love reading. I love listening to audiobooks, if you count that as reading, which I do. I love gathering information. That is a happy place for me. So if I'm activating that part of my brain, that's a recharge. I'm not as active as I like to be, but I like getting into a good box fit class or some hot yoga, and that's quite a mindful activity. So active meditation, which is a work in progress. And I'm half American. Dad's American, so I like sport. Full stop. I happen to like NFL and things like that, but I enjoy being a spectator. I enjoy the drama and the politics and the strategy of sport and whether it's Formula One or football or whatever it might be. So I don't feel like I've got too much challenge recharging and refreshing, because I do lots of it on a regular basis rather than having to go, I need to stop and catch my breath for a week.
I think that's probably the healthiest way to go as well.
It works for me. I acknowledge it's not for everybody, and not everyone has the luxury of being able to do that. I suppose I reflect back, that was for a large period of my career to date. It was not even 9 to 5, because a lot of it was in events and venues. So it was, weird hours and shifts and things, supporting team, and I love that. But I had to, what recharging and refreshing looked different for me then than it does now. So it's more, I guess, more compartmentalised and broken up. So
would you say that was an influence in any way on your choosing the path you're on now? That ability to take those breaks when you wanted and having more control over your day to day?
Yes, it was. Probably, and looking back, I didn't realise how important that factor was for me when I made that decision. But certainly when I sort of left employment and went into, reflected and went into self-employment, there was an element of frustration of, sick of being a cog in a machine where you could see opportunities being wasted through risk aversion or bureaucracy.
Yes.
But also, catching myself doing work that I felt was just not adding value. Writing monthly reports that didn't get read until a minute before the meeting or at all. Just stuff I'm spending a lot of time on stuff that I'm not sure, that I certainly don't find much value in, and doesn't seem to be adding much else. So I think that ability to go to reframe again my version of, I suppose, playing to my strengths. I think got to a certain age and comfort level where I was okay going, I know I'm not great at everything. I'm good at some stuff, and I'm pretty good at a whole bunch of things. And I'm pretty crap at some other stuff as well, or I don't value it, or I could be better if I tried it. But I'm okay saying, if you want someone to plan the bejesus out of something, it's probably not going to be me, unless it's for a holiday or something that I value. But if it's and I've just got comfortable being that person and going, okay, I don't have to. I can be okay in that skin, and that's okay.
I think that's probably true of myself as well. Certainly, the conversations I've had with Chrissy, my wife, have been around the fact that I don't know whether it's that we've got less tolerant of doing things that we don't want to do or dealing with people we don't want to deal with, or whether it's just that we want to use our energy where we feel we get the most benefit out of it. And I think you can spend a lot of energy dealing with stuff that adds no value to your life.
Yeah.
And all it does is drain your battery. It doesn't give you anything back.
Yes.
Whereas if you spend that energy doing something that gives you something back, you actually are effectively recharging.
Re-energizing, exactly. Yeah.
And I think you do get to a point where you realise that actually that's important. Focusing on those things that give you the most gratification out of what you're doing is really where you're going to get the best results.
Absolutely. And if that means sometimes you've got to think about, am I in the right job? Or am I spending my time with the right people? All those things, that whole self-awareness and self-reflection, and knowing your own unique mix of characteristics. I mean, I get to do a lot of personality profiling type stuff in my work, and I love that. Because not just because it's fascinating to see what makes people tick, but also helping people to have those epiphanies or realizations about themselves or why they clash with a particular individual, and if that helps them be better in their work or better in their relationships, then that's a win. It's a win for them, but by definition I get a bit of a win out of that as well, because it's that ticking that making the world slightly better box.
Cool, very good. One last question I've got, which I think hopefully will involve a bit of a conversation. Is there somewhere on this planet that you've never been to that's on your bucket list of places to be? Probably
about 180 countries, I'd say. I do love travel purely because travel opens your world, it provides opportunities. So that's a tough question. But given the day you've asked me, I've just been messaging a former colleague who I got on with really well and sort of hopefully helped her in her leadership journey, who's now over in the US and doing awesome things in her career. And it's her birthday today, and I messaged her to say happy birthday. And she happens to be in New York because it's President's Day and she had a day off, so she treated herself to New York. And New York, I've never been to, and definitely on the bucket list. I've been sort of west coast of the States a little bit, but nowhere near enough. That would be near the top. But equally, I'd go back to all the places I have been again because they're awesome. And it's a big old world out there. So
absolutely,
we've only got a few seconds and minutes to finish this conversation. Otherwise, I'd list all the reasons I'd happily go. Most parts of the world, possibly not Ukraine at the moment, but
possibly not Ukraine at the moment. But I mean, even that, I think that visiting Ukraine or somewhere like Ukraine would give you an appreciation of how fortunate you are being in New Zealand.
Absolutely.
That's I look at that earthquake in Syria and Turkey, and I think, well, that really Christchurch was quite lucky. In the way that the event happened in Christchurch. Yes, we lost about 160 people, and yes, it was devastating for the city. But when you look at what happened in Syria and Turkey and how many people have been killed and how much it's going to cost to rebuild the place, we got away quite lightly.
Got away, and also, if there was ever a message needed around perspective, things like that, or things like, or I have little tolerance, unfortunately, I'm trying, but for the small, sweating the small stuff, people who get all angsty and up in arms about someone didn't use this word right, or I wasn't. I again, it was ironic. We talk about empathy, and I truly try and see it from their perspective, but I sometimes want to help them, encourage people who get in that space to think, maybe think about some others' perspectives. It's not just about you sometimes. Earthquakes and disasters, or people who just have the crappiest run of bad luck despite being awesome people, and vice versa. It's just perspective has a lot, and that's the empathy and empathy side of things. But no, to answer your question, New York would be top of the list, but it would be a long list.
A long list of other places. Same here. I mean, that's one of the things for me that I think you need to take those opportunities to travel when you get them, because every country you go to, you get a different perspective. You get an appreciation of where you've been. You get a better understanding of what drives people to be the way they are.
Exactly.
And I think that if you take the view that you don't want to travel because everything's great where you are, then you're really limiting your life enormously.
And of course we're both going to say that because we're aligned that way, and if someone likes to live in the same house, it's absolutely fine. I think to me it's around celebrating difference, because I think it's awesome that we are all different, but also acknowledging at the same time we actually we have a lot more in common than we have different.
Yes,
and
yes.
that sometimes gets lost in the.
It does.
The rah-rah.
I think we're, and that's another thing where the internet is fatal. I think is it creates divides as much as it creates connections.
Yep.
And that we need to do our best to close those divides because we are just one race.
Yeah.
We are on just one planet, and we've all got to live here.
Yeah, and if we don't get our act together and start pulling in the same direction and agreeing on some stuff and letting go of egos and self-interest,
And
we won't have this
motivations.
planet, and none of this becomes will be too much of an issue anyway. Because
No. To be fair, we're not going to kill the planet. All we're going to do is kill ourselves. The planet will carry on.
Nature finds a way.
Absolutely, and it will be a much better world for us not being on it in some ways.
Absolutely. We're not all we're cracked up to be sometimes.
I don't know whether that's a good place.
No way. There you go, people. There's our lesson for today. We're all a waste of time. No. I think that's a personal motivation for me is just there's a lot of stuff we cannot do or we cannot control other than our own choices and our own mindset. And mindset's massive.
Yeah, I think mindset is really important. I also think that we do need to make sure we make good decisions, and the only way to make good decisions is to have good information.
Yep.
And so make the best use of the resources that's available to you, and make sure the decisions you make, you're making for the right reasons, and then the world will be a better place.
Yep. There you go.
There you go. That's a much more
solved
positive
it.
place.
Solved all the world's problems. There we go.
If only it was that easy.
No, it took an hour or so. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, good. Yeah. What should we do with the rest of eternity?
Read books.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've got plenty beside the bed at the moment to work through, so that won't be a concern.
That won't be a concern. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for taking the time to
Pleasure.
talk to me. It's been very enjoyable, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to my podcast, A Penny for Your Thoughts, with me, Steve Penny. I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation, and I look forward to sharing my next conversation with you. If you want to find out some more, please do get in touch, and maybe we can have you on in a future show. Thank you.